Oy vey. Hi, my name's Jakob, and sometimes I feel the urge to say things predominantly to figure out what I'm thinking about. Kinda like Joan Didion, you know? Why am I here? I don't know. I mean, predominantly it's because there is a topic that's been on my mind for a little while now. Actually, it's been on my mind for very many years actually. And I feel like I have something that I need to get off my chest, or maybe interrogate while speaking to a camera about it. So, and this topic kind of relates to these sort of weird, sticky characters, these morally corrupt, morally sort of ambiguous, frequently misinterpreted figures from cinema and maybe from literature a little bit as well, but I think mostly cinema really, because people don't read. Like, I know it's surprising, right? Characters like, Travis Bickle, Tony Montana, Tyler Durden, that kind of stuff. The Joker, Arthur Fleck, like that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to like figure out why they're so sticky and what makes them sticky and why some of them kind of just like had a shelf life and then like went away, and why some of them kind of persist, and where they persist and how. And what this means, what this says about, I don't know, me as a person, you as as an audience, or as as a culture. And this is a topic I have actually thought about for a very long while. I actually have written about some of its aspects. I've written about Travis Bickle. I've written about Fight Club. I've written about Falling Down. I've written about like tangentially about Joker. And there's still something that just refuses to leave me alone. So yeah, I just wanted to dig into this. But before we do, I mean, I just mentioned, like, I've written about this, and if you're interested in reading what I've written, just check out my website, check out flashonfilm.com, where I have been writing for a number of years now. There's hundreds of essays and reviews on cinema and culture that I have penned, perhaps sometimes against better judgment. Check out my podcast. I've been podcasting for years as well, and it's a show where I talk about movies that, I don't know, are a little bit off the beaten track sometimes, maybe a little bit forgotten sometimes, less forgotten than others, but yeah, go and check it out. And also do all the YouTube things, go and subscribe. If you like what I'm talking about, if you don't mind me and don't mind my voice, go and subscribe, like, share, I don't know, tell someone. Like, I'm not going to push myself onto you. Like, I'm not one of those people who will just be, hey, look at me kind of person, posting the same thing on TikTok or YouTube 15 times until one of them hits, because I'm not after cheap approval, and I'm not going to perform something that I'm not to gain, I don't know, to farm engagement or gain notoriety of some description. I'm just here because I think I have stuff to say, or I feel like I have like I need to say something, or maybe this is like an interesting outgrowth of what I've already been doing for a while now. And yeah, and if you're after like a 5-minute short essay, you've come to the wrong neighborhood, bro, because I don't know where this is going. I have notes, but mostly this is like a freewheeling situation where I'm just here staring into the lens, and I don't know what's gonna come out at the other end. Like, I don't approach this with much of a structure. Let's get into this. Okay, there are many reasons why I'm here, but specifically what spurred me to think about these sort of characters, sort of misinterpreted, misconstrued, perhaps mislabeled, anti-heroes, maybe even corrupt villains, frequently sort of relabeled as folk heroes just for the purposes of I don't know what, is that some of them really persist. Like, for instance, I'd be scrolling through social media, even though I know I shouldn't, because it steals my time like nothing else. But sometimes you'll still find yourself, scrolling through reels, or I don't know, checking what's happening on the feed, and like an image will scroll through my feed, and this would be an image of, you know, defense, Michael Douglas in Falling Down, like or like a little clip of Michael Douglas in Falling Down. And actually, this is what spurred me into thinking about this. A movie from 33 years ago, Falling Down, that's clipped into a 2-minute reel where a guy walks into a restaurant, terrorizes everyone with a loaded gun, because he wanted breakfast, but they only served breakfast until 11:30, and it's 11:33, and he loses his shit. And it got me thinking, because like you look at this reel, and maybe this is like a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because on one hand I'm just here thinking, right. Well, this movie is like 30-something years old, and I can still see images every now and again from that movie. I don't see images from Taxi Driver anywhere near as much these days, or Fight Club, but this one, Joker, they do persist. They do crop up every now and again. And then you ask yourself why that is. And probably one of the answers is because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I actually tend to stick for a little bit longer looking at them, precisely because I wonder and just sit there in amazement at how are these characters so sticky? Why are these people so obsessed with these characters? It's not like I agree with them, right? And then as a result of that, the algorithm, you know, rewards me with more of that stuff. So I am my own self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's kind of where I sit. But I saw this image of or this clip of Michael Douglas losing his marbles over not being able to be served breakfast, and then losing his marbles again upon seeing the burger. And then you look at comments and you'll see like, this man just wanted breakfast. Oh my god, he's literally me. He represents what I think. He says what we all think. And I'm like, wow, have you not seen the film? Probably not. That's probably the answer. But, you know, like, this is kind of where I kind of find myself, because he's not the only character that's been sort of misconstrued that way, and all kind of sort of, I don't want to say begins with Taxi Driver, but Taxi Driver is kind of one of those movies that became notorious for being misunderstood, right? And I'm just wondering, like, how, why, right? You watch Taxi Driver, and actually, you know, like, when I was younger, I kind of saw Travis Bickle as some kind of an anti-hero, like a weird through the looking glass sort of warped perception of a superhero. Like, he's the sort of the, like, what if Superman was evil kind of person, or what if Batman didn't have a moral core of some description, right? But there's more to it, right? Specifically because, like, people watched Taxi Driver and actually thought at the time, like, wow, literally me. Like, they look at a guy who sits in his own sort of shoebox apartment, ingesting media and just getting angry at the world at large, just driving his taxi, saying like, look at this scum. Oh my god, how I hate this town. Oh my god, someone needs to clean this up. And he says these things, right? And people will like watch this film and say, yeah, totally, man, yeah, oh my god, it's so like I sympathize, you know. You know. And then they overlook the simple sort of explanation of of this guy being mentally deranged, right? This guy is on a downward spiral towards self-destruction, and they say like, no, but he does a good thing at the end, like he redeems himself because he saves Iris, Jodie Foster's character, from sport, and he just and this whole thing just results in a flurry of violence, right? There is a separate conversation about how Paul Schrader spent his entire career trying to shake off the sort of how much he loved The Searchers, because this movie is essentially The Searchers, and then he went on to do Hardcore, which is The Searchers. Some years later, he came back to the well and he made the Lonely Man trilogy, or the Man in the Room trilogy, which is First Reform, The Card Counter, and Master Gardener, which are essentially like revisits of the same concept of the God's Lonely Man. A guy who's on a downward spiral, trying to rid the world of filth and evil and sin, without necessarily noticing, or maybe in these cases while also understanding his own role in this corruption. You could accuse Paul Schrader of not being able to shake off this idea of the God's Lonely Man archetype and this driving his entire career. But nonetheless, in 1976, it stuck, and it stuck profoundly. So much that even in the 90s, you'd enter like a teenage boy's room and you'll find Taxi Driver sort of a Taxi Driver poster staring at you from the wall. And sometimes people would still talk to you in a way like, you talking to me, you know? Yeah. Because they saw Travis Bickle as a cool character, and I was looking at him as like, he's a lone wolf on a quest to self-destruction, and he's the kind of guy who now would be watching Fox News and voting together with MAGA cultists. Like at this point, if you're still trying to figure out where is this guy going, like where am I? Like I'm not here to go and talk about the message, or you know, like I'm not going to devolve this into like men bad. Oh my God. Patriarchies or whatever. No, or like, look at that, totally me, these movies are misunderstood. And I'm trying to suss out and look at the systems beneath it, trying to understand the sort of the machinery underpinning all this, and I'm trying to do this in real time. So if it takes me like an hour to get through this, apologies, okay? Because at the end of the day, I'm not much of a fan of, you know, these slick 5-minute video essays where I've written everything beforehand and all you'll be hearing is me reading from the page. What you're hearing is me processing these things live. And I think I already said that, which also underscores how very much in the moment, in media res, this whole experience is for me, okay? So apologies if I repeat myself. I'll try to, you know, like take some things out in the edit, but at this point, no promises, okay? So where was I? Travis Bickle being this sort of lone wolf, and this guy being completely misunderstood because there was a cohort of people seeing him as, oh my God, he represents what I think and feel. I must adopt him as a personality. This is my identity now. I'm going to go into a supply store, wear a bomber jacket and whatever, and just stew in my own hatred because I think Travis Bickle did that, so I should too, right? And people then fail to notice that this guy was already like a lone wolf on a spiral towards some kind of a violent carnage, and the only reason why you were able to redeem him was that at the very last minute, through coincidence, realistically, through coincidence alone, he redirected his rage towards doing something good. He did something good almost for the wrong reasons, and this is how people would say, yeah, Taxi Driver has like a happy ending. Like, look at him. He actually found the light, you know, like he saw the light at the end of the day, at the end of the tunnel. Because they look at the carnage, let's just say the desaturated climax of the film with people being blown to bits and Iris being saved, and then just cut to him just lying in bed and whatever, and then hearing a letter from Iris's parents being read to you, and you think like, look, he did a good deed, like good on him, you know. And then this is where like the interpretation ends, because it almost like validates this mentality. Maybe I'm a lone wolf too, like maybe I should be a Sigma male, and that's a good thing to do, without necessarily understanding that there's a scene at the end of the film after that where he's already driving his cab again, like having recovered, and he's giving a ride to Sybil Shepherd, whom you see in like mirror reflections, and then she leaves the cab, he has a brief conversation with her, and he leaves. And this is a scene that I've always contested that this is a misunderstood scene, because it clearly identifies him as being on a cycle again, because you only see Sybil Shepherd in a mirror reflection, and when she leaves the car, you could see the outside of the car is like a leafy sort of brownstone suburbs, and then he pulls away, and he's immediately in this hellscape again with steam and pimps and whatever. And I'm just like, what kind of a street is this? You know? Oh wait, what you saw was a hallucination. This guy maybe imagined seeing Sybil Shepherd and imagined being sort of pulled by the sort of by the dream of getting with this girl who was clearly very attractive, and he found her very attractive. And then once she leaves, he's back on this cycle, and almost like you could imagine like an off-screen narration from Dexter saying like, tonight's the night, he's on the prowl again. And I'm like, how do you people not see this? Because in order to do that, you'd have to look into the movie just a little bit, and it's so much easier to stop at this interpretation of literally me. He did the right thing, and he hated a lot of people and he was I don't know, he was right for hating them because they were scum or criminals or whatever, without necessarily seeing the systems underpinning it. And forget the fact that I don't even know if he was a real veteran as well, because nowhere in the movie you see this kind of confirmed. All you hear about Travis Bickle comes from his mouth, and at this point he's a very unreliable narrator, and that's on purpose, because Paul Schrader wrote him ironically, and Martin Scorsese directed this movie with the sense of irony and distance, because not doing that and maybe having committed to making sure that people would get it would look preachy, and I think that's kind of why you kind of got Travis Bickle to stick around as a weird folk hero for disenfranchised men for the next 20 years or whatever, including John Hinckley Jr., who's like, I don't know, like a would-be assassin. And then you have like characters like Tony Montana who'd just be like, look at him, he's so cool, he's so, I don't know, charismatic in his drugs and whatever. He's like a violent opportunist who doesn't see other people as peers. He sees them as tools to use. And then you have, and then you kind of go into like Tyler Durden, whatever, in Fight Club, and that's another one that stuck for a very long while. Even though critics kind of understood at the time of the release, I was like, oh, this movie might be dangerous. Oh my God, we shouldn't really be letting people watch this because they will clearly misinterpret this. And some of them did, specifically for the same reasons, because you kind of get presented with this cool character who's just presenting you with these like easy answers to your problems, because you have a guy in here who's like a listless man who's not necessarily on a downward spiral, but he's coasting in neutral, and he hates his job. He doesn't understand his life. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have a purpose in life. You know, like every day is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, because he doesn't sleep and whatever. He has to go and pretend to have cancer to sleep at night. Okay, that's how empty his existence is. And then he meets a character who actually is an expression of his own id, who's like the cool guy who, you know, like he has sex in a way that he'd like to have sex. He's great with women. He's charismatic. Like men want to be him, women want to be with him, and whatever. And then people would say like, oh my God, he's literally me again, right? Like, I know when I was 15, you probably would have found you would have probably saw me quote Fight Club unironically for a little while, but I was 15. Okay, I didn't know any better, because this is kind of how I understood it. Some movies really benefit from being seen with a little bit of commentary or a conversation at the end of it. And like Fight Club is a great movie, and the book is even better, I want to say. But it specifically is great because of the conversation it elicits if you're allowed to have this conversation that's guided by someone who has lived a life. You know, like, because the danger of this is again to see this as, oh my God, it's literally me. He represents all my problems. I feel the same way. Therefore, let's reject the system, right? That was the sort of the message of this movie. You know, you're not defined by your job. How about we destroy jobs? As an adult, you eventually start understanding this. That, oh, this is a satirical expression of what happens to listless men, purposeless men, if you don't give them a role model, if you don't give them a path to follow and a purpose in life. They will eventually cause mischief, or they might cause mischief, and also they may actually fall prey to skilled manipulators who will use them for their own insidious sort of goals, right? And then you have characters like, well, Defense in 1993's Falling Down, which is kind of like the reason why I'm here. And then you have Joker, Arthur Fleck in 2019. That one is a little bit more complex, because all the other characters I've been thinking about have been written specifically with like an ironic tinge, or at least a satirical take, as in Fight Club is a satire. Falling Down is a satire, although it's a little bit more preachy than others. And you still, if you clip around the character, you'll be able to come back with, oh my God, he represents what I think. He's like the common man who's been disenfranchised, so how about we just go and lash out against literally everyone. But if you look at this character, a guy who seemingly like that was kind of like the expression, like he snaps in the middle of the day because it's hot outside and he goes like enough is enough. He's like the guy in Network, like I'm not gonna take this anymore. I'm mad as hell. I'm gonna take this anymore. And he goes on a rampage because all he wants to do is go home. He wants to visit his family who's estranged from him, and they have a restraining order against him because he's a violent lunatic, right? But you can just easily miss this or choose not to see it, because he will go into a shop and rage against a Korean clerk. He will berate him for not being able to pronounce words correctly. He will say 85 cents, 85 cents. And he says 85. There's a V at the end. Like, he's so pretentiously superior to him. And then he ruins his shop because apparently a can of Coke is too expensive for him, right? He will then lash out against a Latino gang because he wanted to have a sandwich on a piece of land that they claimed was their own, and then he goes and guns them down too, and goes into that fast food joint and just has this iconic moment where he goes like, "No, I want breakfast even though it's 3 minutes past," and you identify with this idea of like, give this man his breakfast. It's only 3 minutes, like. But rules are rules, and it's not like these guys who work there have anything to say about this, because there are bosses who would look at their work and maybe will say like, like if you make an exception once, you have to make an exception again. And this whole idea of switching a menu and just doing stuff backstage becomes meaningless and just causes chaos. But you look at this like, yeah, corporation's bad. Lash out against the workers on minimum wage, and maybe against the manager who's on like a minimum wage plus. Okay, that's what this movie told you to do. And they would all say, yeah. And I'm looking at these characters. Joker is another one. When you'll see this guy with like a massive grievance against the system because he's mentally ill, he doesn't get the help that he needs, like his support is cut off, and then he just slips into into this sort of downward spiral and lashes out against the system. Only the difference being that he gets rewarded in the end. Like Travis Bickle doesn't get rewarded. People may overlook it. The guy in Falling Down dies. He gets gunned down by Robert Duvall. At the end of it, he goes like, "Am I the baddie?" Like, he's literally like, "Am I the bad guy here?" Like, yeah, you are. Sorry, and people still don't get it, even though it's the preachiest of them all. Meanwhile, like Joker goes like, "Oh my god, I'm the best," and oh my goodness, and everyone's like, "Yeah, can I put makeup on?" Right? Let's lash out against the system, and what they mean by the system is like people that they think took their jobs or whatever, or I don't know, people who are easy to lash out against, as in people weaker than them. I don't know, minorities, poor people, homeless people, women, I don't know. And that's kind of why you could sort of paint all these movies as potentially dangerous, because they invite a misinterpretation, right? And this is again like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because not leaving, okay, well, if they invite this sort of friction between what the filmmaker or storyteller potentially meant and how it's read, because if you close this gap, then what happens is it will look like an after school special, as in like, oh my god, you're like, this movie is literally telling me how to think and feel and what to think about this character. So separating the two and giving you a little bit of a room to think and room to breathe essentially invites you, the viewer, to just make up your own mind. And that's a danger, because people will frequently stop at that point and say like, yeah, literally me. Can I go and start a fight club with my buddies and then start causing mischief and maybe just like, I don't know, lash out against a credit card corporation or whatever, without seeing that, oh yeah, there's an interpretation at the end, because you're not supposed to be identifying with this character. You're supposed to rebel against this character, or find out that there's a difference between rebelling against something and standing for something. And that the movie, at the end of it all of them should tell you that, oh my god, I don't have a purpose in life, I should find a purpose in life. Not necessarily, oh my god, I don't have a purpose in life, it's totally someone's fault, I should lash out against my neighbors. That's not the message. But still, these readings persist in culture. Like, even like you can take it to extremes. Like you will still see memes of Patrick Bateman walking, like earphones in his ears, walking into the office, and he's like, "This is me on the way to work." I'm like, this guy is a psychopath, a cannibal psychopath. He has more in common with Jeffrey Dahmer than you, and you're idolizing him or aestheticizing him, or or just excusing everything around him and normalizing this aesthetic or some aspects of his behavior, thus making it easier for you to adopt some aspects of this personality or of this character that maybe you shouldn't, okay? Because it's a Sigma grind set. He's a Sigma lone wolf. Look at him. Like, no, he eats people. By virtue of like, and actually on top of everything else, there's this idea that maybe in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was, and even in the 2000s, it was much more difficult for these characters to stick culturally for longer. Now it's so much easier because it's so much easier to take these characters out of context. All you need to do is clip around certain scenes. Clip out a Travis Bickle manifesto when he's just like when he's speaking to himself about how he hates everything, and he's just like, look, it's totally me. Like, look at me. He's against the system. Like, vote for Trump or whatever, you know. And by the way, I think Travis Bickle would vote for Trump. But so much easier now to clip around the edges, to kind of just remove the nuance or remove the satirical edge, essentially to hijack your limbic system, or just to completely take over your limbic response, as in like, oh my god, this makes me feel something, and draw a straight line to the prescription that the character takes as the right one, as in, you know, Foster or Defense in the movie, he's just like, I've lost my job, I don't have my family, I feel alone, I feel betrayed, therefore it's everyone else's fault but mine. And if I can find someone to lash out against, it will definitely be people of color, because he lashes out against literally everyone who's not white. And funnily enough, when he's confronted with the sort of his mirror reflection, essentially, because he goes into the sort of the supply store run by a guy who's like a proper Nazi, a guy who reads Mein Kampf for fun, and he berates two gay people who walked into his store. Like, there's no ambiguity about what this character is. Michael Douglas looks at him and he goes like, I'm not you. I'm like, no, you are. Like, this, like, the guy sees him as like a fellow traveler, like, oh yeah, like, I totally understand your mission, go brother, you know, like, you should totally just lash out against everyone. Like, I wish I could do that, I could join you, but I have a club foot or whatever, I have, you know, like, I can't run very far or whatever. But he's like dumbfounded. He goes like, I'm not racist. Like, no, well, you say you're not, but you're behaving like one, or like your actions speak for themselves. But if you clip around that, you'll see him as a folk hero. And this kind of sort of made me think, I mean, it's like, how have we not learned as a society or as a culture? And like, clearly we haven't. Like, and we're kind of in this weird doom loop, because on one hand, we have these movies, we have these books, and actually we'd like to have movies and books that make us think and feel something. And these are books that actually leave that space, or maybe aestheticize antisocial behavior to an extent, because they set a trap for you to fall into, so that you'll understand, like, oh, I've briefly identified with Travis Bickle or Tyler Durden, and now I feel embarrassed because I realized that this was a trap and I shouldn't have. And this is how you learn a lesson. Say like, oh, maybe the answer isn't rebelling against the society and lashing out against whatever. Maybe the lesson is finding a purpose. Maybe the lesson is to find like a path, like get on a path to self-discovery, to self-improvement, to self-mastery, and I don't know, finding a company of other people who would be enabling the best in you as opposed to the worst. And somehow these characters stick because they manipulate you as the viewer in the most basic terms and in the most basic ways, which also kind of makes me think just a tiny bit of like how they illustrate exactly how we found ourselves in the world we're in now, because as a result of loads and loads of purposeless, listless men, just, well, I don't want to be like men bad, but you know, like, at least in these cases they're all men, because they would externalize their frustration rather than internalize their frustration. You'll find female characters like that who would not behave in the same way. They will go through the same turmoil, but they will internalize it. Think about Nina in Black Swan, for instance, right? They will just keep it all in more often than not, and that's why they don't make such powerful archetypes, because I don't know, they don't stick that way, right? Because they don't externalize these sort of frustrations in a relatable way. Like, I don't think women watch Black Swan saying like, "Oh my God, she's literally me." No, I think they're better than that. But you'll see how we found ourselves in a situation where you have people identifying with essentially an emotional sort of knee-jerk reaction espoused by a character, and they're left there because they don't make the sort of the cognitive leap to understanding that this is a satire, or this is an ironic reading of a character, that you should really think about what it says about you if you initially responded to it, or you should understand that the path the character takes is the wrong one and they should have really diverged to somewhere else. I don't know, sought help or have gone on a different journey, but they didn't. And the divergence between the two, as in like you understanding that the path they took is wrong, is the lesson. I think this is just like a tragedy of the life we live in now, because the internet as a whole, the sort of the online culture, essentially rewards not making that leap, not taking the step, the cognitive step that stops you in your tracks. Because what these characters like Defense or whatever, Travis Bickle, whatever, what they do is they make you realize that you feel something like, oh, I'm angry too. I feel disenfranchised. I don't know what to do with myself. Like, you could watch First Blood and probably wouldn't really take that much of a, like, I don't think it stuck anywhere near as much as any of the other sort of characters I've listed. Even though the guy was like, I don't know, he was literally minding his own business. He was a guy suffering from PTSD, and he was suffering from systemic failures of the welfare state that didn't really care for him. He was a guy who was a ticking time bomb because no one took care of him after he came back from Vietnam, right? He went there, he was turned into a killing machine, and he was left loose, right? And he gets pushed to a brink, and he snaps, right? You know, don't push it, or I'll give you a war like you won't believe. You know, I don't think people could identify with that anywhere near as much, because at the end of the day, he was also an extremely competent man. He was like a very like, not everyone can identify with a Navy SEAL, right? But you can identify with a guy in a suit and tie, or with a taxi driver, or with like I don't know, like a guy who works at a cubicle, because I mean, people don't work in cubicles anymore, but you could identify at the time with these people because the chances were that you were one of them. So I don't think the sort of the cultural traction was there, but you could see that the symmetry was there nonetheless. But where was I? Yeah, like, you're not invited to take that cognitive leap, because after you're made to feel something and you say like, yeah, I'm angry too, I'm frustrated with my existence, I'm dejected, I'm despondent, I don't know what to do with myself, I don't have a purpose, I didn't have a dad to look up to, I don't have a role model in life, and this is where you stop and you see like, oh, maybe this is the way I should go. Meanwhile, if you clip around the movie, you're even just left completely empty-handed. You don't even get the lesson. All you see is a guy raging at a fast food joint because the burger looked like someone sat on it, and you see people in comments saying like, oh my God, leave him alone, he just wanted breakfast. I feel like that sometimes. Have you seen what McDonald's burgers look like these days? Oh my goodness. And how expensive are they? It's all the immigrants' fault. They're going over here, taking our jobs. Oh my goodness. Oh, everything's more expensive. Tariff everyone, but you pay the tariffs. No, it's the Chinese who pay the tariffs. Like, you see what I mean? This is kind of how you get hijacked into thinking things that you didn't even think you did, because what you were left with is just this raw emotion. And I'm angry, and someone says like, I'll tell you what you'd be angry at. Brown people over there. And then you're like, yeah, whatever, they're eating your dogs or something. Like I don't know what the prescription for this is at this point, apart from what we need is better male role models, or better characters to stick culturally, but they don't stick. And this is where, like, I don't know, some idiots like, I don't know, the Critical Drinker or something, like, they would be saying like, there are no male role models. Like, no, there are. It's just they don't culturally stick. I don't know, Logan, he's an interesting character that has, I don't know, he's a flawed character, but he has an interesting arc. I don't know, Ethan Hawke in Boyhood. Ethan Hawke in the entire Before trilogy is a great sort of interesting sort of evolution of a man. I don't know, Aragorn is a fantastic male role model, a guy who steps up to the plate only because he needs to, not because he craves power, right? And my favorite, Rocky Balboa. Holy shit. Rocky Balboa is like the character I could recommend to any man and say like, are you angry? You feel like you're despondent, you didn't achieve anything? Get in the gym, start working, get your nose busted. It's literally in the text in the film. You're angry because you didn't have your shot. Oh no, you're angry because you got your shot, but you were too cowardly to get your nose busted, to take a risk, to take a leap of faith. Go into the ring and get your nose busted. Go the distance. It's not about how much you hit or how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Like these, you can write a whole book of Rockyisms and just sell it to young men as a prescription for bettering themselves and finding a purpose in life. I'm pretty sure it would work. And it's not even stopping there. There's a whole range of male Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, like if you really want to speak to a younger crowd, a guy who would tell like Star-Lord saying like, he may have been your father but he wasn't your daddy. This means a lot, right? And it's not like, oh, these characters are weak or whatever. No, they're just nuanced like real people are, and they don't offer easy answers. They don't draw a straight line from your anger to rebellion, because it's so much easier to stand against something that stands for something, right? It's just they won't stick culturally, specifically because the algorithm is designed, and it's not like it's a conspiracy either, right? It's not even like a conspiracy at all, because all this is, like, you look at your social media and at your YouTube feed or Instagram reels, it's all a simple mathematical calculation of, if you respond to something, you get more of that. And then as a result of that, what you respond to is most profoundly is stuff that hijacks your limbic system, hijacks your raw response. Anger really works. If something pisses you off, you will probably stay, and even though you may actually disagree with what you see on the internet, but you'll look at it more, you'll see more of that, and eventually it will affect you, right? And these characters that way kind of stick. Like, you'll see people identifying with Arthur Fleck saying like, you get what you fucking deserve, whatever, or just see themselves as, this is literally me, I feel disenfranchised, I need to start a revolution, whatever. You will not see anywhere near as frequently clips from Rocky as he loses his championship bout, but he shouts after his girlfriend because the reason he was so happy was that he proved something to himself, you know? And that means stuff. That means something. But you don't see it anywhere near as often, because the emotional response to that is different. It's based in something positive, and just positive doesn't work online. One of the sort of things I kind of just really passionately oppose is the idea of like labeling movies or books as dangerous or toxic, or even certain character traits as toxic. Because when directed in the right way, they stop becoming toxic. They stop becoming problematic, or when they're understood, and when the emotional state underpinning them is understood and rationalized and directed correctly, it kind of can turn into something interesting or something positive, right? Because you can look at, I don't know, dejection and anger from exuded by Travis Bickle defense, or the guy in Fight Club, or Arthur Fleck, or whatever, and you can say like, okay, well, I understand. Like, you almost have to behave like a parent, you know, when you hear your child cry, if you go into an emergency mode and say like, oh my god, she's crying, I need you to stop crying, I need to, how about I give you an ice cream? That's not a prescription for healthy parenting. What you need to, what you know instinctively as a parent, what you should know really, is that you see your child crying and say, I don't know, she's crying, and say, you ask what happened. And it's like, well, I fell down and whatever, or this boy was mean to me, and this is where you actually start really, really responding and say like, oh, I understand you feel this way. Here's what we can do, you know. You can fix the emotional state, and you can, in addition, you can make your child understand why they feel this way and how to process this emotion on their own. You don't fix it by giving them an ice cream. You don't fix it by giving them an easy answer to their problem that would make them stop. They will make them to stop crying. Like, I don't know. The response to this would be like, how can we ban all clipping of movies? No, we can't. You can't do that, right? And at the same time, we can't force the algorithm to push more Maximus Decimus Meridius on you, who's like a stoic who was like a noble man who lost everything, and he decided to turn his grief into a desire to fix the world around him and take revenge, which is again like a complex, emotionally complex story with like a very positive core underpinning it, but again nuanced. Right, but you can't force the algorithm to push it more onto people because it's not going to stick, right? So what you need to do is essentially educate yourself and start naming your emotions whenever you see this guy raging out at a fast food joint and say like, oh, instead of saying he just wanted breakfast, saying like, hey, what kind of movie is this from? Maybe I should watch Falling Down. And then actually at that point when you watch it, say like, oh, I feel that way myself. Why am I feeling like that? And instead of saying whose fault is it, because if you start saying this, you look like a zebra looks to a lion. And these lions, by the way, are like politically sort of motivated clowns of multiple descriptions that will just offer you easy answers and not give you anything that would enrich your life whatsoever. All they will do is feed your anger because all they need is your support to achieve their own political means and of power and enriching themselves. But instead of doing that, ask why you're angry, why you're identifying, or you feel like you should be identifying with Tyler Durden or Defense or Travis Bickle or Arthur Fleck or whoever, and understand that there are systems underpinning it of inequality. There are corporate systems that would have decided that this guy's job should have been liquidated and maybe taken overseas, and this is not something that like your neighbor's responsible for. This is something that you get to decide when you go and vote, or this is something that you get to decide when you go and choose which shop to leave your money in. Okay, so there are things you can do and things you should do, but one thing that you shouldn't do is draw a straight line from an emotional based limbic response to an easy solution offered to you by a movie that wants to satirize this response and then captured by people who think that this response will enrich them somehow. Okay, so next time you kind of watch something like this, don't ask like, oh, is he right? It's just ask like, what am I feeling? And where does it lead me? So that you wouldn't have to be handheld when you watch Fight Club again, or you don't leave a stupid comment, oh, Patrick Bateman is literally me. Even though the book was a satire and the film was a satire too. So yeah, think about that. How much of a slave to your limbic system are you? How self-aware are you of your chimp brain, or whatever you want to call it, your lizard brain? Because it's not about what you feel, it's about why you feel the way you feel. And these characters tell you why you feel the way you feel, but you may actually just fail to completely engage with this conversation because many people would stop at this idea of just feeling and identifying. I don't know whether this all made sense, but this is kind of where I'm going to put a pin in this. So let me know if you agree with me or if you disagree with me. I think there's a conversation in this. There's a conversation here about male mental health and maybe cultural manipulation that's epitomized by these like culturally sticky characters that are misinterpreted into becoming folk heroes against anyone's better judgment. So yeah, tell me what you think and catch you on the next one.